Controlled descent.
Sunlight. I've been dreaming of it for months. But it's hard to enjoy alone. The crash seems so long ago now. Father was right. We shouldn't have gone so deep. They do not want us down there. Despite my best efforts, ill health is taking hold of me. Marguerite and Father are already part of this incredible planet. It's reassuring to know that when I go, I'll join them. Until then, well, there's always the view.
And with that, Subnautica leaves early access and enters a full release. G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to Subnautica with Mags. So, after 5 years in development and 3 years of early access on Steam, Subnautica has finally reached its release. All the final polish has been put on, the finish to all the storylines has been completed, and now fully unlocked and available for everybody to play. So it's now entirely possible to finally complete the storyline of Subnautica. Now, I'm not going to be going into spoilers with that in this video. In fact, I am planning on starting the final Subnautica series that I will do, the one that I've been holding off on doing for a long time. But at its core, Subnautica actually has 3 storylines running simultaneously. As you saw in the cinematic release trailer for Subnautica that I placed at the start of the video, there is in fact 2 ships that crash on the planet. The primary storyline is your story as the survivor of the Aurora crash, which you can see here in the background at the moment. This story is completely told by you as the survivor and is written in your own actions within the game world. Now, the second story is the story of the Deviant, a second ship that crashed under circumstances very similar to the Aurora, 10 years before the Aurora went down. And the story there is the story of her survivors, what they discovered, what they did, and what eventually became of them. Now, the third storyline in Subnautica is the story of the planet itself. What has actually happened on this world to make it the way it is, and it binds the first and second storylines together to create the whole. As Subnautica is a heavily storyline-driven game, especially for a survival game, which generally have a fairly light, fairly flexible storyline, the developers have been purposely holding back certain parts and certain pieces of information on these stories, as well as the ability to actually complete the storyline during the entire course of the early access development period. So nobody who purchased this game on early access has ever been able to fully complete the storyline. Until now. And I think this is a really great thing, because the story of Subnautica is a big portion of the driving force behind the game. Setting yourself into the right situation to be able to survive long term isn't overly difficult, even just staying in the safe shallows and not expanding into the deeper portions of the game. It's relatively easy to set yourself up for long-term survival without too many problems at all. But the real danger often comes moving between your bases or shifting resources between your bases in an environment where, well, a large percentage of the aquatic life is actually there to kill you and eat you. But you can get most of this information by simply watching some of the other Subnautica videos from the early access period online. What you really want to know is, have Unknown Worlds managed to fix some of the issues that were plaguing Subnautica and had been plaguing it for some time prior to release? And the answer is, kinda. So first things first, let's go through the most apparent thing that has changed, especially for those who have stepped away from Subnautica over the last couple of months as the patches leading up to release have been coming through, is the graphics. In the lead up to release, Unknown Worlds has polished the hell out of all of their in-game assets. From the Reefback, which is one of the older creatures within the game, up to some of the newest building parts. Everything now looks like it was made at the same time and all looks very current. And this goes beyond texture and just lighting. In some cases it actually goes into changing and updating the models themselves. For example, the tentacles on the Reefback and the body of the Reaper Leviathan. Many of the other fish and larger creatures, along with most of the plant life, has also been tidied up quite nicely. The animations in particular have improved, making the plants look like they are moving and flowing correctly within the currents in Subnautica's oceans. And speaking of the oceans, they've received a little bit of work as well, and it's been beautifully done. The fog effects and coloured effects within the water to make different biomes seem unique and to reduce the view distance in a manner that doesn't seem to be unrealistic, as well as the extra particle effects within the water and some of the animations that pop up every now and again just to give you that feeling of motion. The feeling that you are moving through a volume of water rather than an empty space is incredibly well done and incredibly convincing. Of course, while all these graphics are beautiful, convincing, and work extremely well with the aesthetic of the world, there are a few technical problems floating around here. The first is pop-in. Environmental pop-in is something that was a problem through the majority of Subnautica's early access phase period, and I'm sad to say it is still something that exists within the game now. Granted, Unknown Worlds has done a pretty good job of minimizing the amount of pop-in you will suffer, but it is still there, and it seems to be a limitation of the Unity engine and the voxel-based environment that Subnautica is built on and in. Essentially, whenever you're loading voxel terrain, it has to be loaded in chunks. Now, while you're swimming around at normal speeds with just flippers or just barefoot moving through the environment, the game is able to load the chunks in fast enough that you will never actually notice them, and the experience is absolutely perfect. But once you advance through the in-game tech and get access to the Seamoth and can start crossing the map at much higher speeds, the pop-in becomes very apparent, especially when moving into areas that you haven't previously visited that need to load in completely fresh. Now, the second issue that Subnautica suffered during its early access phase was frame rate drops. This was actually a pretty major issue. The frame rate would jump all over the place. Well, I'm happy to say now is absolutely perfect, and it's extremely well optimized, being able to pull well above 60 frames per second with no problems whatsoever on a recently modern but not necessarily top-end system. Unless you're going to have a long play session. During my time testing the release patch for Subnautica, I noted a couple of things. During the start of the game, when you're freshly booted into Subnautica and it's freshly loaded up on your computer, the frame rate is perfect. It's blitzing along, no problems at all. After about 2 hours of gameplay, however, you will start to see frame drops at below 60. Again, not a huge problem, but it is definitely something that you will notice. As you play through the game even more and get up to the 3 hours, the dips will slowly become more and more severe and more common, especially when loading into areas that you haven't previously entered into. Thankfully, while I have no idea what causes this loss of frames over time, I do know a way around it. Simply saving game, exiting the client completely back to Steam, and then restarting the client seems to fix the client perfectly every single time, and the game goes back to playing completely smooth. Now, that's not an ideal fix, of course. An ideal fix would be to not have this happen in the first place, but at least it's a workaround that does function. Other than that, performance-wise, the game operates exactly as it should. The only other real area to mention for the release of Subnautica is there have been some changes to the crafting system. Now, for the most part, these changes are actually positive. Stuff makes a hell of a lot more sense now, with most of the material combinations actually being a little bit easier to come by considering the number of spawns you have access to now. But the big bottleneck in the crafting system has always been silver, and it still is now. One of the things that I don't like about the new crafting system and materials requirements is actually the foundations. One of the very first buildings that you will have to build within the realm of Subnautica in order to be able to build your first base and have it strong enough to not simply implode. Now, the original foundations only required titanium in order to construct, and as the ocean is literally filled with titanium from 2 major spacecraft wrecks, getting access to the titanium needed to build the foundation was never a problem. However, the new foundations also require lead. lead only spawns inside of sandstone rocks that are not available to mine within the starting area. So you have to go to at least the red grass plains in order to be able to find these. And this is part of the reason why gold and silver is now so important, because, well, the lead spawns in sandstone, which is the one place that you can get silver and gold ore from. This change seems to have been added with the intent of making lead more useful than just building your radiation suit and that's it. But it's had the unfortunate side effect of actually slowing down the early game progression in the game. Instead of being able to establish a relatively small but secure first base close to a series of resources that you may need, you will now have to travel, usually before you've even managed to build the Seamoth, 2 biomes across the map into a hostile area that is near at your maximum dive depth in order to be able to get access to the sandstone chunks that you need to be able to get that lead to start building your very first base. Now, to be clear, this isn't game breaking by any means, but it is just annoying enough to warrant mention. Outside of these things, the game is fun to play. You guys have seen it before, the core gameplay has not changed in the slightest. It's still fantastic, it's most certainly beautiful, it runs well, providing you're not really pushing those long play sessions, and there's nothing really negative to say about it. This is an early access game that has made release done right. I honestly wish I would be able to see more survival games and early access games in general come out of early access in this kind of a state. There is a reason why the community around Subnautica really likes the game, and there is a reason why new people who purchase the game find themselves enchanted with it very, very, very quickly. The only thing that's really missing at this point, and it's something that has been put off the table for the time being with no real additional announcements from the devs, is co-op, and it's been asked for a long time. I myself am very much in favour of a co-op gameplay mode in Subnautica because, well, my boys love watching me play this, and being able to play alongside of them while they're on their computers and actually enjoy the game with them would be absolutely fantastic. And I'm sort of hoping at this point in time that now that the 1.0 patch is out, Subnautica is now officially released, we may see co-op come up in one of the future expansions to Subnautica, or at least in a future content patch that is added for free. I guess we'll wait and see exactly what happens. Anyways, ladies and gents, hope you've enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching. As always, remember to check the video description down below for links to all my social media, to my Patreon, and to everything else in regards to my system. I know this video is a little bit of an odd one, reviewing a release patch, but Subnautica is a game that I've been covering for so long at this point, it felt really strange to do a full review. Anyways, ladies and gents, remember to click that like button if you do, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and until next time, take care.